Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we have myself, Mighty Pete, and we are joined by Jean-Philippe Chandles. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Pete. Great to see you in this context.
Yes, indeed. We've had a long conversation before we've even got to start here, so it's beautiful to have you on. So, Jean-Philippe, tell us, I suppose, give us the easy ones first. Well, I don't know if they're easy. Who are you? What do you do? And where are you from?
Well, actually, I'm reconsidering all of those questions, but in a nutshell, the official version is, so I'm from Switzerland, from the French-speaking part, but also a big experience and a big intimate connection to Brazil, which has been quite, complementary to the Swiss experience, to call it that way. I've been a professional sportsman until I was 28. Mm-hmm. So it's a long time ago because I just turned 54 a few weeks ago. But it's still a big part of, I would say, my personal growth and learning process. So retrospectively, it remains an important part of, who I have been so far. I had a long academic experience as a political historian, I would say, focused on questions of power that have been fascinating me for the past decades. I'm a passionate photographer. That's another part of me in terms of hobbies, the creative part. I've been divorced twice. I might say happily divorced. I'm saying this in a way that, things are quiet and peaceful with my exes. And I have 3 kids of 2 different generations. The big ones are 27 and 29. I have a younger daughter who's 10 and a half.
What have you learned about yourself so far?
That there is nothing I see or perceive in the world that is not me. So I am everywhere, unfortunately for me. I can't escape.
Could this be like, it's almost like a Truman Show. Could this just be the Jean-Philippe show and actually nothing is happening outside of your own head? Is that possible?
I will not limit this to my head. Yeah. But I think it's part of the truth. I was lying down before we interacted today, and I was thinking of David Bohm's quote, and the quantum physicist, and he was defining consciousness as an internal relationship to the whole, and everything I take from it is a definition of who I am.
Wow.
So it's pretty wild and wide.
The logical brain here kind of wants to jump on or hold on to something, right? Because if you're saying, well, I'm everything, well, then the conscious part, the ego part says, well, how do I quantify this, right?
Well, I would say I'm everything I perceive, which is much more limited than being everything.
And can you trust what you perceive?
I think discerning what I can trust and not is the key question for all of us, I would say. Discernment. And where am I perceiving from? Actually, it's interesting we surf this wave, because in what I teach in business school and leadership focused MBAs and stuff like that, I now always start with perception. And the more I share that with students, the bigger the importance I see in that. So I think when you say, can we trust our perceptions, then the first quick answer would be a priori no. So I would cultivate distrust in my perception, but then step back and discern what I can start trusting in that. And so I think the default programming is a bias in perception. And I've been fascinated by the collective biases we have. As a historian of the modern mindset in my past. And we may be trapped in narratives. And once we're caught in it, then the mind goes telling stories about that. And so when I step back, the very first, I would say, perceptual connection, holds nearly everything, because if this is biased, everything that comes next also will be.
How then do you how do you keep in touch with reality then, if or how do you master conscious perception or of the present moment?
Well, I tell you when I find out. But I suspect, we have these aha moments, those flow states, or alignment and some kind of intuitive feeling that, if we unpack it, like mind, heart, and, guts and body are just perceiving or expressing themselves as one, then there is a knowing in us that, there is something accurate in the experience and how we perceive it. And I think the perceptual bias might be to consider the default programming of being biased is real life, and these are supposed to be exceptional moments. But maybe not. Maybe we can turn the table and make this more and more where we operate from in life.
Let's take off an easy one. What does fire in the belly mean to you?
The first word that emerged from that is aliveness. What's alive in me? What am I eager to experience or allow itself to manifest and unfold in my day? And interestingly, this is exactly the kind of question I ask my students and myself, because I feel I am in a very deep individual transition that is just resonating with the bigger collective transition occurring right now on this planet. And I think that's a very real question. Very few people have answered so far. I wake up in the morning and so what? Beyond pre-programmed expectations. And so that for me, ideally what the fire in the belly would be. This kind of inner drive, this kind of spontaneous life energy that wants to manifest in a joyful, playful way.
Is it something you have? Is it something you've always had?
It's far from constant. It's really far from constant. And I would say the realms where I feel it's more present is deep contact with nature, all aspects of intimacy in human terms, where I get into thoughtlessness in creativity, or in the zone while I'm skiing. That these are the occurrences in which I would, be the closest to what we're referring to here.
Would you define that as like a flow state for you? Just that you just are, you're just present, you're just being?
Yeah. An example of that is a skiing experience I had last year. And I think it's relevant for our conversation, you know, to and you know, a friend of ours had an event online about, you know, loving what we do, and this was a precondition to participate. And I couldn't because I had some other, you know, commitments, except for the first day. There was a Sunday, and I had decided to honor that day with my loyalty and presence online. And I got up in the morning, and I had skied more than 60 times that year. That was last year. And part of me was saying, okay, come on, Jean-Philippe, you had enough. You had a load of ski fun, honor your commitment and go online. And I had another voice in me saying, I mean, look at those conditions. They're so perfect. And I even stopped thinking, and the next thought I had already been driving for half an hour in the direction of the mountains. So I forgot about the Congress online. And when I reached the slopes, I was in a flow state for 2.5 hours nonstop. I was crying. I had tears every time I was on the chairlift. And it had been 2.5 hours of perfect curves. And I had this core intimate experience of being skied. It felt like I wasn't there. I was the curve. I was the movement. And whatever the condition of the slope or the snow anywhere, those curves would just keep manifesting in a perfect way, in a perfect momentum. And I mean that's been, you know, surreal. And it has not reproduced itself in that way since then. But this, you know, this is the, you know, the most intense and dense and profound experience of that kind, and I can remember of in the last months.
That's fascinating. You don't ski, you are being skied.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for me? What's that telling you?
It's really like the notion of spaciousness takes over, you know, and not form. That reminds me of Eckhart Tolle, who says align with space instead of form. And that's the feeling I had. I had the feeling of being space. It's as if I was the space in which the Jean-Philippe body was, you know, having the experience. But I didn't feel any part of me was in control of anything, actually. There was not a brain or even a body focusing on making the perfect curves. You know, the curve was happening and the body was just involved in it somehow, you know. And I suspect people who surf in the ocean have that kind of experience, because I even believe if you're not in that state, you don't surf at all. And so in my case, it happened skiing, yeah. And the, you know, the connection between the experience and our previous conversation is that, and as my friend would have, you know, debriefed afterwards, but I mean, you were in the Congress because this was the loving what you do kind of experience. So something in me followed that trail and not the trail of loyal obligation. So there was some kind of inner referential at work. And it was not like the mind have said the 61st time, just one more time going to ski. It was something literally otherworldly that needed the other 60 times to manifest, and needed that, I was going to say choice, but was it, you know, or to follow that calling, whatever. But, you know, speaking to you now, I feel that day was unavoidable, you know, like there was something in it that could not have happened. So I don't think there is a recipe for this.
I mean, there's a form of comes across like a form of resignation to self there.
Yeah, it's interesting you phrase it that way. Yeah, I think there is some kind of bowing down to something, but not the bowing down, but there is something that it would be more than me. You know, it's not like, okay, let's follow God's voice. No, it's some kind of inner calling, but there is a sense of obviousness in that. You know, it just happens. So where does it happen from? You know, maybe we can call it source, or you know, what I would call my inner source might be totally aligned or resonating with source with a capital S or something. If should we try to approach this with words? Okay, but I think that's as far as it can go. I mean, it really just happened, and it was so right, so timely, so perfect. And of course, it seemed like an extreme case, but in a moment like that, there is no question about trusting or distrusting perception. You know, it's beyond that.
You mentioned previously you were basically you're going through a change. You're going through a, well, you tell me. I mean, what is it you're going through right now? What stage are you at, if that makes sense?
In a nutshell, is I think it's all about trust and letting go of control. And about discovering within me how deep the control thing has been installed, even though I've been teaching the country for years in very subtle ways. And so it means I think the core calling here is to have this as a true transition and not just a cosmetic one. So it's not only transforming the appearance of who I may be, or how I could advertise myself or name myself, or what kind of project I would get involved, or where would the money come from, all those, I would say, classical questions I have been going through. But to have a shift in what I would call my operating system, and you know, truly migrates towards allowing things to manifest kind of mode, which means trusting life, trusting things will unfold in a timely manner. So this is the closest of, you know, what I could refer to as faith. And in a very, I have no religious background or anything. It's just like I see when I'm operate from there, this kind of faith in life, everything is just fine. But still, most of the time, something in me wants to seize the pieces of information and control them and plan them and map and put that in my calendar, and this is not working anymore for me. And as I mentioned, I just hurt badly my shoulder, and life is things stop. And so my physical condition in this transition is to accept the physical stopping and learn from it and see what emerge through that. And as you know, I would say my worldview now is very much fractal, I would say, in a sense that I do not believe the collective of this planet and Jean-Philippe are two different things, but two different aspects at two different scales of the very same thing. So everything I share with you about this control thing, I think is the DNA of everything we can observe in the so-called outside world. And it's exactly what we see at work through the whole COVID management process, or with the current warfare. And these things, you know, appear to be something in the news, but they're the same narrative. That we are, you know, believing, or we have been believing in the past couple of centuries. And both of these news examples are manifestation of you know, the world of control freaks that we we keep creating together at all scales. And that goes from geopolitics to what happened in my kitchen with my partner or my daughter. And in the way I can envision my transition. Because if I want to control my transition, I believe I'm transiting, but actually I'm just recreating the same old stuff, just with a new thin layer of fresh painting. But I didn't change the structure behind it.
Are you a control freak?
Absolutely. To an extent I would never have imagined before.
What's giving you that extra insight? Is it just awareness? Is it exposure? What is it?
Recently it's been inner observation, to say it's not a question of it's not only my agenda, the calendar, or like I saw myself as a pretty balanced guy, like you know, really not working too much. I have that piece of luck, or I created that, whatever we want to interpret it. And I worked like 60-70% for years. And I just realized I did it that way because underneath that apparent balance, there is a tremendous sense of urge and control and self-inflicted pressure for big and small things. You know, even like rushing to pee. That's a basic, stupid example. And now I don't have that energy, so I observe how much energy waste I've been going through all those years, even though I was working less. It's not just a question of agenda, is how am I operating and taking action? And so I see my own inner pattern, something that, okay, I have an information emerging, and then there is something, and some kind of a self-declared emergency situation for big and small thing, you know, you want to solve it now, okay, and wow. So it's a kind of a permanent sprint towards solving whatever bubbles up, and whatever bubbles up is irrelevant. You know, it's the way I relate to it that I have a deep aspiration to change. And so yeah, so it's this control thing is really subtle, and it's operating at both at macro and micro scales. And so I thought I was out of the mainstream operating system, and I find myself just being an ambassador of it in different ways.
How did it come about then for you to be working 60-70%? I mean, is that a conscious choice? Is that by design? What is it?
I was I would say it's provocatively lucky to have had a long unemployed stretch like 15, 17 years ago, and then to end up in the social help desk in Switzerland, which means the rebuild process was from scratch upward and not from what we call a middle class Western pattern downward. And so I think it just reprioritize what our true needs are. And even though I have, materially speaking, a very Swiss middle class like kind of life, I observe that I do this with half the money most of my friends are needing for the same thing. And I don't lack anything. So, that's the starting point. Less needs, less need to work. And the second thing was when my daughter was born, and that was in 2011. So a few years after that social and financial crisis of mine, it was obvious that I would spend the full day a week with her. So more than 80% was impossible in terms of design. And so these two intentions mixed up together gave birth to this kind of lifestyle where I always work like, and it's anywhere between 60 and 80%, rarely more.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that we have these occupations, and it literally is occupying you, right? To get more stuff. And then we get more stuff because we want to feel better about ourselves. So we then go and work some more to get more, to feel better.
Addiction trap. Yeah.
How bad do you think that trap is for people? Or how common is it?
Well, I think it's neither good or bad. I just think it's hopeless. It's really the donkey and the carrot metaphor, and the root vicious part of it is that it entails starting from a place of not enoughness. Yeah, that I see all around the place. It means I am not enough, therefore I'm gonna buy stuff to feel I am enough, and I will feel that for a couple of hours. But then and the root cause I'm not enough, I need another kind of compensation. And then we have a whole economic system created around this. And as somebody, I forgot the name, said, consumerism works because it doesn't work. So because if it really worked, then you would buy one stuff and be happy forever, and consumerism would die with that. But it doesn't, because you'll need more, And it's interesting because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, in the sense that we have a planet and an ecosystem that provides enough of everything we need. And because we believe it doesn't, we're creating a life pattern where soon we won't have enough. And it starts with energy. Well, when I said that, we can look at everything with fractal eyes, like I am a microcosm of the system I'm perceiving, and vice versa. And all the conversation I had with my own energy and pressure management, I think is perfectly valid for what we can observe as the external system. So, there is an energy crisis looming here. It has been for 50 years, even though we pretend it's not there. And I don't think it's an energy crisis. I think it's an energy management issue. If you think about that, half of the energy we waste as middle-class consumer could be saved. So we could have the same lifestyle with 50% less energy. And if you put that in resonance with what Jean-Philippe shared about Jean-Philippe, I could have the same agenda and calendar and life with 50% of the energy I'm spending. And so, yeah. And interestingly, just saying this to you, my skiing experience, pops back into my awareness, because the one thing I said about that, it's while you're having that experience, it is effortless. And I think effortlessness is one of the toughest things to sell out there, because another part of our collective belief system is, it has to be hard, It's not only I want the carrot of what consumerism is offering to me as a reward for something, or as a compensation of my feeling and not enoughness. But it has to be a fight, a struggle. There needs to be some struggling or even suffering between me and the reward. And I think that's a very toxic belief. And it's irrelevant.
Why do we make ourselves struggle? As you say, I mean, to be your truest creation, like skiing, is just that. It's flow state, right?
Yeah.
It takes no energy. It just is, and life comes to you as opposed to life happens for you. But yet we choose to, date the wrong person, do the wrong job. We choose to carry all this burden, this, it's close, but it's not right. But yet we choose not to choose. We choose not to change it.
Hmm.
But why not when we see that? Or is that the awareness that once we see it, then we can't unsee it, right?
I guess I suspect I don't have the absolute answer to that, but my hint would be it must be a mix between true survival challenges that we went through as a species for millenniums, now transposed or translated in some kind of a cultural collective mindset, that somehow downloaded this in our psyches, and was translated into. The key thing is, we have to do something in order to deserve to be happy or enjoy life. So whereas this might be considered at the birthright. So I see there is a lack of self-esteem, both individually and the way we perceive ourselves as a species. That we suck as a species, a very widespread belief. I see it everywhere. So that's another manifestation of the not enoughness we mentioned earlier. And why is it so deeply rooted and long lasting? I suspect because the third element in the mix would be a sense of recognition. I heard some of those law of attraction kind of teachings, and one thing was metaphorically brilliant. It says, you don't need to dig a hole to then get out of it and be happy. But as you've learned that when you dig a hole and find a way out, you have people waiting for you and clapping in their hands. And so then you dig another hole because you want the clap in the hand again. And I think we live in a world, and if you don't need to work hard, you're supposed to feel guilty about that. Even amongst my friends, it's very subtle. It's very subtly toxic also. How often, also just because I work less than average people, you know, the injection, like, no, but I'm working, you know, like, you know. So with the crypto subtitle, you're not, or less than I do. Okay, so, and so what, you know. But I haven't since we're trapped into that. So somehow I still follow ice hockey as I used to be a player, and I'm always stunned in the interviews of players how self-repetitive they are. You know, like this that's the number one cliche, you know, compliment you could do to any sportsman honors, how the biggest hard worker ever he was on the face of this planet to get his fucking gold medal. And the irony is then, you know, to work hard in the sport are you supposed to love becomes more important than the love of that sport art itself. It's as if the purpose becomes working hard, you know, whatever that is.
I mean, is that the search for identity, and then unfortunately you add consumerism in on top of that, and marketing and everything else, and saying, well, okay, you have this job that you don't particularly love, you know, it'd be a really good idea if you got a promotion, because then you get that big beautiful house and then that really shiny car, and you can have all this. So it's marketing is, well, is marketing most open to people who are searching for an identity? Not that I'm not trying to bash marketing here, but it's just marketing is a vehicle or as a channel to connect between the inside world and the outside world.
Well, I think marketing is neutral, you know, it operates in whatever works. And so if for most people working hard and getting the carrot at the end works, that's where marketing is going to focus. You know, the day what works will be love what you do kind of purpose, then this is what marketing is going to focus on. So marketing is just, I would say, a mirror of the mainstream belief system.
Should everyone be responsible for their own lives then? Is that key?
Well, absolutely, yeah. I think according to me, one of the core illusion is to believe that we're in an individualistic world. I believe we aren't. I believe we're in a personalistic world, behaving like a herd. You know, and in Greek, persona means mask. So that's what we would call the ego, and that's where marketing is addressing people. Being an individual means being undivided, which means being integrated, which means being whole. And I think we suffer for lack of that, because when I truly become an individual also means I'm sovereign and conscious in my choices. And so I will be provocatively saying that we need more individualism in order to, you know, transition to truly what would be a new collective.
What would a new collective achieve?
I think the challenge of that new collective is that we cannot decode it with our current language and belief systems. It's beyond that. It emerges from a different source. And in my current understanding, I would say the precondition for that is a significant number of individuals cross what I would call some kind of portal. And that portal is something you can only get through alone. And I think that's what freaks us out, because everything else that holds us back are in-group belonging and collective willingness to share the same flag and ideas and to get the fucking tap in the back by fellows, whomever they are. And as long as my crossing the portal depends on that, I'm not a sovereign individual, and I'm not in a position to generate any new kind of collective. And as I've not bumped onto such manifested things yet on this planet, I suspect that we're, I feel that's what we're being called to, to allow to manifest in the upcoming years.
If you were to set a set of rules for your life, 5, 7, 10, whatever, I mean, what would they be?
Well, I would have 5.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, there are the pointers into that newness we can't apprehend with our, current perceptual tools. So the first one would be empathy in its truest sense, like the reappropriation or the rediscovery of our empathic capacity. Because if I feel you, or I feel nature, I feel the world, which is a characteristic of mammals, by the way, I will not need any sustainability education. I will just not kill the damn tree or, imagine such a thing as industrial production of meat. I don't need the moral transition not to do that if I'm fully empathetic. So that will be number 1. Number 2 is to migrate more and more to operate from a place of appreciation. So, to manage my attention in a way that self-appreciation, self-love, and seeing that the cup half full will start to dominate over the opposite.
Do you have a practice, by the way, for managing, that appreciation? I mean, is that a gratitude? Is that meditation for you? What is that? How do you enable it?
Yeah, I think it's a discipline in our attention. I mean, if we take one other provocative example, so now everybody who's watching the news, which I am not, is talking about war. But even though there is that event right now, 99% of the planet is at peace. And I can see both things. It doesn't invalidate the fact that there is a war and I can be empathetic with what happens. But it doesn't take anything away from the fact that 99% of the planet is perfectly at peace. Yeah. So it's a re-engineering of what we're focusing on, because to focus on the dark cloud in the blue sky has become quite our default programming, and the more so as we're connected to the media. So it's really ultimately it's the awareness that I really don't know how free we really are or not, and how much of our conditioning we'll be able to overcome or not. And we can have abyssal philosophical discussions about that. But what I am absolutely certain is that I am sovereign in the way I am directing my attention. And so there is room for choice in terms of appreciating things. And one of the historical character that inspires me the most is Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camp. And just to take the example, not diminishing anything of the hell he went through, but he was aligned in his dignity, and he was able to appreciate the sunset there. And I often think about that, because he was able to appreciate a sunset in that environment my environment never ever even got close to his. Even in the worst, darkest days, which means there is always something I can appreciate in that. And I'm sharing this with you. I do not consider I have installed fully that new mindset, but this is really work in progress. And as far as I'm concerned, even the little progress I've made is really, really life-changing.
So the two main points we had there is sort of rules for your life, if you like, where empathy was the first and appreciation was the second. What would be the third?
So the third one would be, to see everything as a fractal, as I said before. So, I have this Talmud quote I love so much, which is, "We do not see the world as it is; we see the world as we are."
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, let's say I look at guys like Trump and Putin, and I'm triggered, and instead of wasting time and energy analyzing and discussing about that with other people, is, why am I being triggered? And what am I learning about myself? And which means, what is my relationship to dictatorial power in my own life, and my own kitchen, and my own way to operate every day? How am I being a dictator to others or to myself? How much of a warfare and conquering, other territories, even on a small scale, is part of the game I'm playing every day? And I believe, working on that is, much more beneficial to humankind than shooting Putin. I mean, it's the same for what we mentioned, the energy management before.
Mm.
There's a guy called Michael Brown that I really like as a writer and a spiritual writer, and he's been focusing a lot on also trauma, childhood trauma, and his take is, wow, we're just still behaving at a wounded child level on this planet as so-called adults, and energetically speaking, we have that inner emotional layer of our early ages that keeps boiling and heating up because it's covered up with our mental layers and physical bodies and whatsoever. And he says, so for him, the climate heating is just the external byproduct of that. And I think it makes a lot of sense to see it that way. And so, how can I look after my own inner climate? And in my world, that much more efficient than buying an electric car. That might be part of the solution or not. But if I'm a fractal of that climate warming thing, then it's not only my external actions that will have an effect on that, but I see my inner work and process as a big part of it. So that's the number 3, the fractal thing.
Mm. Number 4?
Number 4 is nuance. And nuance is, I mentioned Trump before. So when he was elected, for me, it was an earthquake. And at the same time, I had interaction with a neo-Nazi student, which resonates deep and violently in my personal story. We don't need to go there, but just to see these two guys, my neo-Nazi student and Trump, has been my biggest teachers. Because I really was invited to see what I was projected onto them within me. That's been a huge shift in my perception and in my life. And so what I mean by nuanced is, if I can walk with the shoes just for a few minutes of even my worst enemy and understand why he sees the world that way and why for them it's the right way to look at the world. It doesn't mean I have to agree, but there is always something to take away from that. And so nuance is the cure to polarities and the extreme dualistic way we have to resonate about everything in this world, starting with politics, left and right. And for whomever watched the Social Dilemma documentary about social media, that's really where it operates from. To get people addicted to screen time through projecting their own polarities onto anything, in favor of vaccine against, in favor of politician, or most forms of activism are that way. So nuance is a way to connect these two aspects and slowly migrate towards a sense of oneness.
Is oneness a purpose, do you think? And is that a potential purpose for our lives, just to be one, to live as one?
In my worldview, it what always have been and is and always will be. It's the essence of all things, and it's just a matter whether we see it and operate from there or not. Because if we mention it as a purpose, it might infer we're not there yet, and we have to generate such a thing as oneness. And I think it cannot not be here, but we can be blind to it. And every time I'm not nuanced, I am blind to it. Now it's like, we can joke with that, it's like, and I can identify with my past, spiritual ego self. Like I was going to retreat and meditation for years. And so I would, oneness and interconnectedness would be my new gods. And I would advocate that everywhere. But then everybody who would not believe that would be an asshole, which is the opposite of oneness. So it's just a word, yes. And if I really operate from that, there is nothing with which I am not one. And that includes the worst. So even the people who are the fiercest advocates of separation and division, I am one with them. That's the big paradox. And that's the fifth point, by the way, embrace reality as paradoxical. Two things that seems contradictory for the logical mind, can still live together in peace. And that's the condition. If I can truly apprehend just what I said now, you're the master of division on this planet. But if I truly operate from a place of oneness, my oneness includes divisions. So the mind says, no, I cannot go there. That's impossible. But ultimately it is. And not only it is, but that's, I think the only way to go.
Yeah, for you, is there a gap between who you are and who you truly are? Does that gap exist every day?
Yeah, I would say there is a gap of who I truly am and who I believe myself to be. And one of the latest insights I have, and I think in the world of structure, the world of form, you know, we can get very close to a perfect imitation of what is true, but the most perfect imitation of what is true nevertheless is an imitation. And always will be. And that's another way to talk about the portal I was mentioning before, you know, to let go of that structured understanding I want to hold on to feel safe, and you know, truly start operating in uncharted territories. And I think the big shift, it's not, you know, I'm in mindset A and now I have a new mindset B that is my uncharted territory, but then I'm going to hold on to this. No, I mean, it's a permanent process of permanently updating my browser of how I, you know, apprehend and you know, what I would call reality whatsoever. And so it's not, I go from known to unknown. Unknown is the operating system. So even though there is something new popping out tomorrow, after tomorrow, it's going to be again something new. So the newness and the unknown becomes the main operating paradigm, and not a place to reach. And so, you know, it means the fear of the unknown, I suspect, is one of the biggest hurdles I see in myself, and I suspect in most of my fellow human beings.
What is your biggest fear? Is that it?
That's a very good question, because I think I suspect our biggest fear is the biggest compass. Like, instead of running away from it, dive into it, and that's the shortcut of our evolution. And I'm not sure I have the answer to this in this exact moment, because I believe that's a part of the things that are being redefined in the current transition I'm going through.
Not that current transition. I mean, do you have any expectation of where you're going?
I have a sense of how I wish to feel beyond that portal. So how I wish to feel on a day-to-day basis, with the kind of partner and people I wish to co-create with. And that becomes clear every day. But then when I'm freaked out is, for now, I really cannot see how I can call this the form it takes. So it seems like the marketing plan is getting more confused every day. Even though, you know, how we'd like to feel becomes clearer. So it's a kind of, and it gets us back, you know, to where we were at the beginning, to say, if there is this faith and trust thing, then the marketing plan is absolutely secondary or even irrelevant. And it will have a name and a form and a label or not on a due time. But it's not necessarily the place I have to start from. Yes. And well, you and I work together with a constellation of amazing people, and we're we still use tools as mission or whatever kind of code name we want to use for that. And interestingly, my refreshment update of this in the past months has been, restoring a healthy intimacy with life. And I think that's the other side of the coin of my deepest fear. Yeah. The opposite of that, which means being not having that intimate connection, would be my deepest fear.
So is it the opposite? It's disconnection that is your fear?
Yeah. When you say that, what I see are the living dead. So I think it's the fear of death, not the fear of death in the sense of the afterlife. Because I sense I have a very, it would be arrogant to say I have no fear of that, because I suspect it's engineered in our biology. But I have a deep level of trust that okay, it's a portal towards the biggest unknown. But I think being dead while we're incarnated is a real possibility, and this is what I fear the most. And I suspect some moments in my life I have been like that. Some kind of autistic self-lockdown. So you seem to be alive, but you aren't. Or just to be operating from, what I call the autopilot mode. And I sometimes see the shadow of this. I mentioned my life balance, and I'm happy to have evolved in a way that I feel very comfortable even when I'm alone, and I live close to nature, and I walk in the mountain and ski, and recently also that beyond this very charming appearance and apparent balance, there is a real potential risk for me to get lost in that. It's like you move away from prison, and I put you on a desert island somewhere with palm trees and the Caribbean Ocean around. Compared to prison, that's paradise. But if you stay there for 20 years, I guarantee you're just going to be another prison. And so I think that's, part of my fears.
It's that it's the fear of self, really, isn't it? I don't know. How many, totally unscientific, of course, but I mean, how many people do you think are awake and not the dead living? So the opposite of dead living, that you are living, say. I mean, of the population, your experience, how many are living and then how many are dead living?
I guess I have some kind of maybe a paradoxical answer to that. The first one, I would say, the scientific statistical one, like we have the numbers, like 95% of the time a modern human being is in that mode. So it's just 5% of aliveness and true creative choices and impulses and so on. So I suspect that about the same ratio. But then we refer to, the developed country or rich country middle class. And as also have my experience in Brazil and many people I know who are from Africa and so on. So paradoxically, the population in less favorable conditions, economically speaking, they seem to be much more alive. And that's also why we love those exotic trips there. So the real question is how we can have both the let's say the holistic and global awareness of things with that sense of aliveness. And I guess both type of human being have a part of the puzzle to solve the equation. You mentioned materialism and consumerism, and I observed that in Brazil. Like when you go to a private condominium of richer people, they behave like Swiss people. I'm fully and oversimplifying stereotypes just for the purpose of making things clear. So we have exceptions everywhere, but if you see the Swiss people like more cold and maybe more shut down, and of course there is a level of average wealth here that's higher than in most surrounding countries, and especially in Brazil. But in those economically privileged neighborhoods, they build walls and they socialize less and they are less alive and less joyous, as you can imagine when you see movies, and not dancing as much. And so there is some kind of correlation, like, I get the carrot, I own it, and then I make walls to make sure nobody steals it from me. So it's kind of human disconnect for the sake of, material safety. I think it's might be a part of the this kind of collective process we're into. Now I would say the scientific answer to what you asked. Now, if we look at development maps, but I think that resonates with the people we encounter in our lives. And I would say then it's probably really less than 5% that have integrated these two things.
How does that make you feel?
But paradoxically hopeful, because I think it's much more than it might have been 50 years ago. Mm. And as a guy like Ken Wilber would put it, the tipping point will be 10%, not 51% or 100%. So if we move that fast to nothing, to nearly 5%, and all we need to reach is 10% as a tipping point, it might happen faster than we think. And beyond that, I also believe that our minds are limited by a linear understanding of things. And so we have a linear math, and we look at everything from a structural point of view. And if we open up to, invisible realms and parallel dimension and something that's way beyond just the particles we're made of, we don't know what kind of shortcuts can emerge or are already here and we don't yet perceive them. And so I'm not sure transformation and transition is going to be linear in any aspect. So that gives me even more hope.
Beautiful way of looking at it, because having talked about that before, people will see it as almost depressing, it's how people, how many people are living versus dead living. But yeah, I mean, to be hopeful about it, it creates opportunity, right? It's perception again.
You're reading my mind, because the power of addressing perception. This is what I said to my student last week. We need a perceptual revolution. And I mean, if I'm not aware that I wear a lens to perceive the world and there is a bird shit on my windshield, that would be my perception. The bird shit is going to be everywhere. And I think that's the perceptual world we live in. Mm. We see bird shit everywhere, and it's built in. our perceptual device to see things in a gloomy and negative and pessimistic way. And that's part of the paradigm we're invited to overcome. And if we look at the current paradigm with the eyes of the current paradigm, it's hopeless. It absolutely is. But then it's a good thing, because everything else is just a regurgitating of the same old shit. And this does not work anymore. And we would be fooled to deny it. But then if I look at that with alarmistic eyes, emergency call, pressure-driven responses, the paradox is I keep reenacting the same paradigm again. You know, it's like the snake biting its own tail all the time. And but it's a big challenge, because there is a part in us that wants to control the transition. And if what we invited is exactly to let go of control, then you know, what is meant to manifest is going to manifest. And the good news is, as you are the master of what you pay attention to, you know, there are lots of ways for each of us to deke those gloomy collective inputs.
What's your fifth rule?
What's my first?
Your fifth rule for life.
My first rule.
Your fifth.
Oh, the fifth one you said?
Fifth one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned it before. It's the paradoxical thing.
Paradoxical.
But it's great you click back on this one, because it also means I am part of the old system, and as I believe I'm a fractal of it, I am the old system, and I am also the new one. And maybe in my lifetime, I am always going to be both, and that's okay. That's the way to see myself in a nuanced way, and to get rid of, you know, wanting to be the Mr. Perfect of the new world and then the old one. And I have been that, and it doesn't work, neither for the world nor for what I have to communicate, and much less for my personal life. So, you know, I think I'm a hybrid. Most of us are, and that's okay. And you know, if I'm made of, I don't know, whatever percentage of the new now and of the old now, as long as the percentage of the newness grows, I think I'm going to be happy, whatever the ratio is.
Are you happy just being? Are you in a happy place?
When I look at the world from there, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm.
And as I said, I'm very tired those days. I have those physical challenges and surgery and so on looming in the near future. And there are moments that the only thing I can do is really, you know, abandon myself to fatigue. And surprisingly, when I'm there, there is just peace. And when I look at my life from there, I say, wow, okay, rough physical stretch, but okay, you know, it's part of my process now. But in that space, there is not much to be really negative about, if anything.
Who do you work with, and who can you serve best?
It's an open question I have right now. I'm working with young people, 18 to 24, and adults. And something in me would like to take a shortcut and include kids and families. And it's currently embryonic, but as I believe the root of what needs to be changed in our civilization is in the realm of intimacy. I see what we point outward as being this big power game, politically, economically speaking, actually is at work every day in our intimate spheres. And I think we educate our kids like that, we get married like that. And because we have that way to relate to one another at that cellular level, this is why we manifest a civilization like that. And so finding a way to restore a healthy intimacy at that level. So some kind of education, I would say, that would be transgenerational, is something that really starts to, make sense for me. So it might be one of the direction this transition is pointing at. Maybe I'm going to say something else in 2 weeks, but if we just freeze it today, that's what I would say.
Powerful. If you were to try and describe your fire in your belly in 1 or 2 words, what would they be?
Allowing and playfulness.
They feel opposite. It's maybe my perception.
Well, I see allowing as, letting go, letting happen, letting emerge. And playfulness is a sense of, this childhood spark and sense of lightness with life and things.
Fascinating. Tell us, where can people learn more about you? Where can they follow you, hunt you down, track you down?
That's an amazing question. I'm laughing because in the moment we're talking, my mailbox provider and website and everything, that has been oversimplified. So I just have my LinkedIn account for now. But everything I mentioned is blocked in this very moment. Even I can't access my email. So I think, given the conversation we just had about transition, it's it's rather a fun place to be. But yes, LinkedIn is always an easy way to connect. Know just a bit more about this snapshot I left there on the screen, and get in touch if anything is calling in that direction.
Is there a final message you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Slow down.
Powerful. Jean-Philippe, I knew it was going to go in some wonderful direction, and it went in every direction, and it's wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for being present. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you for sharing. So I've no doubt we will speak again. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm grateful to you to open that space for this wonderful jam session we just had. And to be continued with more crazy adventures.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.